welcome to this special Dittmer Knittery video. My name is Bev. You will find contact information in the description box below. And here at Dittmer Knittery, it's felting day. I am going to be hot water felting the May Day bag. And I'm going to take my camera and my lights to my kitchen where I do my hot water felting by hand and show you some of that process. So you will hear my voice, you will see my hands, but you may not see me again during this video. I'm going to put my hair up, I put on an old t-shirt that I know I will get wet, and let's do some felting. I'll see you in the kitchen. Here is the May Day bag in my kitchen, ready for hot water felting. This is the side I would call the front. It will be embellished. I plan to put some needle felting of a scene on there. We'll see how that goes. And then let me show you the other side of the bag. Or before I show you the other side, I'll show you the inside of the other side, which has the pocket sewn into it. And you can see my stitches there along the bottom of how I sewed the pocket in. Loose stitches, you don't want to make them too tight. You want to retain all the stretch you can because this will be felted and it will shrink. And I have sewn the side seams as well. I'll show you the outside in a minute. It's barely visible on the outside. But I wanted to show the pocket in like that and mention again, to sew it in loosely. It's going to shrink with the rest of the bag, so you don't want to sew it in tightly. And because it's going to felt, those stitches will felt, and it should hold well in place with some loose stitches that don't have to be closely spaced. And there's an example of what it looks like on the inside with the pocket sewn in. This is what I would call the back of the bag. It has the pocket inside of it. You can see the outline of the pocket. You can see there's the flap that will go, it folds over onto that side. So this side will have a button to go in that buttonhole and hold the flap closed. You can't see any of the stitches where I sewed the pocket on the inside. And once it's felted, it will look very nice. I believe. We're about to find out. It's time to felt the May Day bag. Here it is in the felting pot. This is a large cooking pot that used to be used by the church. It was no longer in use, so they let me have it for my felting project, and it works great, my felting projects, and it works great. You don't want to wash the fibers from the wool and all that soap down your sink, so I have this pot that I do the felting in. I have a waste bucket here to the side with a towel on the floor so I can get rid of any wastewater I have, carry it to a drain, and safely dispose of it in an outside drain. I have my rubber gloves, some olive oil soap, plain olive oil soap, and I have some hot water on my stove. This is not a project for small children. It involves hot water. So older children may be under supervision, but it's very hot water that I use. This can be accomplished with somewhat cooler water, but it doesn't work as quickly and as well. So I like the hot water, and that's why I use the rubber gloves. So I'm going to go ahead and pour the hot water in on this felted piece, and then we'll go from there. depending on how big the piece is. And this is a medium to large piece. This is kind of a large piece. Depending on how large the piece is, that would indicate how much water you would use. Smaller piece, I would use less water. But this one I poured in almost all that pot full. And it's going to be a little bit too hot to work with right away, so I'm just going to let it cool off for a couple of minutes, and then I'll get started with the soap and the agitating. I'm going to begin felting this bag with some olive oil soap and some water. And like I said, I have a towel here to one side. I have a towel on the floor. I know I'm probably going to get splashed on. Just begin agitating. Make sure it's good and soaked, and get some soap in there. I anticipate it could take up to an hour or more to complete the process for this particular project, and complete the felting process. And of course I can't do that continuously all in one session, but I will try to time it as I do it so we can have some idea how long it has taken. You don't see much happening right at the beginning. Well, actually you do. First it stretches. It becomes larger. It becomes quite a bit larger, all stretchy. And so that's why, use a little caution, keep it in the water, try not to pull on it and stretch it. And just get it good and soaked and get the soap in on it. But you won't see much change, much felting right at the beginning of the process. So a basic explanation of what's happening is this is 100% wool yarn that's knitted. And so the wool, just as it would if it were your wool sweater you accidentally washed, the wool scales open, tangle, shrink, and become solid fabric that's smaller than the object you started out with. And turn the bag inside out and check on this pocket. One of the few things that could go wrong, rarely goes wrong, but it can happen, is something like this pocket could felt to the bag, which would make the pocket useless and might ruin the bag. So at the beginning of the process, you want to check and make sure that's not happening. Move your hand around in there carefully. Again, try not to stretch things, but just making sure it's not sticking to itself, felting to itself. That can sometimes happen at the seams as well. So check those. Another good reason to turn it inside out is to take a look at the seams and make sure they're not felting onto the fabric. And like I said, that's rare, but I offer the caution because if it happens, it's really disappointing. It can ruin your whole project. Of course, we don't want that. And that said, once the felting process really gets started good, there's no more concern about it felting to itself. Because it's only, say, in the first 15, 20, 30 minutes of felting that you might have any concern about it, the fabric sticking and felting to itself. you begin to see a slight change in the texture of the fabric of the knit stitches. This is hot work, and I will take a break in a minute. I know that I want to keep going, so I don't go to the point of exhaustion because I know I have more to do. And so, kind of when the water starts to cool off a little bit, my arms get a little bit tired, I'll take a break. The strap is going to felt right along with the rest of the bag, but it might need just a little bit of extra attention. You want to make sure it is moving through these stitches where it's inserted, and that moving it through there also will help felt those openings and the strap itself. And I'll probably talk about that a little bit more as we continue. In the pocket again. Everything looks good so far, and I don't expect to see much felting, much change in the fabric itself yet, but it is beginning to show some difference. That's the pocket. Can see that it is beginning to show some difference in the texture of the stitches, which indicates it's beginning to felt. And it will take a while to complete the felting. So although these seams here that are holding the pocket in place, they're not fully closed yet, they will be. I don't have a concern about that, because this will shrink anywhere from 35 to 50% overall. The item will shrink. And I generally don't measure before I felt. I do stitch count so I know how I created it at this size, and then when I'm done, I will measure it so I know next time how many to cast on to make a bag of this size, or how many less to cast on to make a smaller bag, or how many more to cast on to make a larger bag. And I think I will take a short break. This is the front of the bag, the outside of the fabric. After just one session of felting, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, I did time it, but I haven't looked at the time. But I wanted you to see that there is already some change in this fabric. It is beginning to felt. Looking very nice. This is Knit Picks palette wool yarn, 2 strands held together, knitted, and I've felted it before and it felt very, very well. I've used just 1 strand to felt, and I've used 2 strands in this case. Of course, I'm sure you could hold 3 strands together, which I'm contemplating. I would like to do that, give that a try. I'm slopping a little bit more water than I usually do because I have my pot tilted so you can see what I'm doing. Trying to keep my head and body out of the way. Now the strap is beginning to felt also. And it helps if you just gently pull it through these openings where I have inserted it through the bag. And do this throughout the process a few times and try to make sure you work each little place on the strap from time to time, just so it turns out even. And you saw the knitting of this strap on the machine, and you can see that it folded in on itself. It curled up just like stockinette stitch will and made a nice cord. And when it's felted, it will look a lot like that. It's already doing a good job of felting because it's a small piece itself. That's not a lot of knitting right there. I hope that makes some sense. The flap also might need just a little bit of attention just to make sure it's felting as it should. And the buttonhole is a hole, which it is. Looking very good. That's the outside of the fabric flap, the buttonhole. And just continue to agitate, because although I can see that it's felting, yes it is not finished felting by any means. It will be a solid fabric. You probably won't be able to see any of the knitting stitch definition when it's fully felted. And I have reheated my water. The water got a little bit cool. I have a pot dedicated to heating up the water. I don't use it for any other purpose. I just use it for heating up this type of felting water. So I have reheated my water. Nice and hot again. I added a little bit more soap. I'm looking at the inside of the bag now. There's the pocket that is felting quite nicely. It will definitely be attached to the bag and be a nice sturdy pocket ready for use. I think all these holes will close. If they don't, I'll put a few more stitches in there and it will be just fine. I didn't want to stitch it too tightly. So rather that than have the pocket stitched on so tightly it deforms the bag. You know, if it shrinks more than the bag does, it might make things look funny. But with as much felting as we have left to do and as much shrinkage as I believe will happen before it's finished, I think all those holes will close. And now I'm not concerned any longer that the felting might stick to itself, that the pocket might close, or that the seams will stick to themselves. So I run my hand around those things just as part of the felting process, not because I'm concerned they might stick to themselves, but just because we're felting everything now, trying to get it even. And with a project this large, sometimes you have some areas that felt more quickly than others. I try to felt it as thoroughly as it will felt. You can stop at any time if you're satisfied with the way your felted object looks. I prefer to felt thoroughly until I feel like the object probably wouldn't felt or shrink anymore. And that makes its use more predictable. If it will not change shape with use, that makes it better for use. It's predictable. It's the size and shape it's going to be. that's the front of the bag, the fabric. There's the back with the stripes. Things are felting nicely. I had two different friends observe me doing this, and they were interested to see and asked to watch while I was felting, so I showed them, and I quite enjoyed their comments. One said, "Oh, I thought there was a chemical involved, that you put a chemical on it." And I said, "No, just soap and hot water, warm water, hot water preferably. It will work with warm water, just takes a little longer." She said, "Oh, I just knew you just poured a chemical on it and it shrank and did that." And I said, "No, this is how I do it." And the other friend said, "Oh, I thought you just soaked it, that you put it in there and you soaked it overnight, and the next day or whenever, then it was ready and it was felted." No, this is how I do it. And it's going quite well. Lovely item. This item is felting very nicely. I can tell it's going to be a beautiful finished object. And the transformation that you're seeing, this movement from knitted fabric to felted fabric, it's a little bit like magic happening right in my hand, right before our eyes. It's a little bit like alchemy, taking one thing and making it into something that's even more valuable than the original object was. Still one small hole there, I believe, and one, oh, some over there too. So maybe I'll give those areas a little bit of extra attention. And again, not a large concern because I still have quite a lot of felting to do, and if I need to, I can sew that up. It will work just fine. Okay, it might be time for me, and perhaps even my camera, to take a little break. Nice progress. Very happy with what I'm seeing so far. Hot. I looked at the timer of the 2 sessions of my felting so far. One was a little over 8 minutes and one was a little over 10 minutes. So in less than 20 minutes, we're seeing quite a dramatic change in the look of this bag from it's knitted. You could see all the knitted stitches. It was obviously a knitted fabric, and now it's lost much of its stitch definition, and it's well on its way to being a felted piece. This is the front, the striped side, the back. It still needs some felting. And so I'm ready for the next session. careful with the hot water. That might be a little hot for me to continue right this moment, so I'm going to let it cool off for a few minutes. Take a break. Maybe have a snack, and I'll be back. Good progress after less than 20 minutes of felting. And so I'm going to continue the felting and agitating. Again, just plain olive oil soap that I bought from Amazon, the cheapest olive oil soap I could find. You don't want it to be scented, or it doesn't hurt anything if it is. It just costs more probably. But it's nothing special at all. Nothing expensive. And how much soap you use is up to you and depends on the size of the project and kind of depends on experience. You can get too much soap, which is one reason I don't suggest the use of liquid soap, is it can be too much. It can be. Some people use it and are very happy with it. Nothing wrong with that. But I like the bar soap. I'm just working this handle back and forth through here, this strap, trying to make sure that it felts evenly along its entire length. You want it to look the same along its entire length. And try to check it and make sure that all of it is getting felted. At this point, you don't have any concerns about harming the bag by felting it aggressively. So go ahead and agitate. If you see any spots that need extra attention, you can give them a little extra soap and a little extra rub. And you may not see immediate results when you do that. Give the little extra soap and the little extra rub, but it does make a difference in the long run. So these seams on the pocket looked like they needed a little assistance in felting thoroughly. I'm adding a little soap and a little extra agitation right there. And this appears to be felting well and becoming a solid fabric, but my experience tells me that it will probably shrink a bit more. So I'm going to continue. I would like it to be as felted as much as it can be before I stop the felting process. making very good progress on the felting of this May Day bag. I've drained the water just to get a better look at it, and I think now I'm going to pour some cool water in there. Have a bucket with some clean, cool water in it, a clean bucket. And so the purpose of this is if I cool it off and then add hot water again after I get it cooled off and agitated a little bit more, that might help it shrink if it goes from the hot to the cool back to the hot. So I'm just going to swish it around a little bit. It does still have some soap in it because the fabric still has soap in it, although the clean water didn't have soap in it. So that's fine. I can add soap if I choose to, or think that might be enough. But as I said, at this point, I'm just trying to get it to cool off. And if I continue to agitate it and felt it, which I probably will, I can add more soap or not. And this does rinse a little bit of the soap out, but it's no problem whatsoever. It's looking very good. And so I'm just going to let it soak for a few minutes, make sure it's good and cool, get some more hot water, and agitate again. Sometimes at this point the project looks finished to me and I'm done felting, but this one does not look finished to me. I believe it will felt and shrink some more. So I'm heating some more water. I'll let it sit for a little while I take a break, drain this cool water, and then come back and agitate it some more. It's going very well. I let the bag cool off in some cool water. I heated up some more water, and now I've put more hot water in, and I'm going to agitate some more. It's looking really, really good. It's showing signs of being felted, but I do think it's going to felt some more. So I'm going to agitate some more. Although the water was quite hot, the bag was quite cool, so I can go ahead and start working it. The water is quite warm, but it's not too hot. If it were, I wouldn't be doing it. Of course, it goes without saying, safety first. And adding a little bit more soap. I believe it will felt some more. And that just takes time and agitation. Have it inside out. I'm checking the pocket. Just looking really good. I don't see any holes in the seams any longer. I will check it more closely before I call it finished. The flap, the closure flap that folds over the top with the buttonhole. Buttonhole has shrank quite a bit. It's pretty small. I can open it up right there if I want to. It's my finger. My rubber glove. And if the buttonhole isn't big enough, I can stitch around it using my yarn needle and some yarn. And open it up with a pair of scissors, very carefully make that buttonhole a little bit bigger if needed. Felt will not fray, but of course you always want to be careful if you're going to cut it. It may not fray, but it might look like it has an unfinished edge if you cut it without stitching around it. Just giving you some tips that help you understand that this is not a difficult skill. It takes time, it takes practice to predict the results, but it's not difficult. And if you want to know what's going to happen, you just do it. I think this is looking really good. Not finished, but looking good. I want to work on these straps a little bit more. Turn it back right side out. It's quite a different piece of fabric than it was when I first began working on it, isn't it? So the way it's forming those air bubbles tells us that that's becoming a solid fabric. It's not as absorbent as it was when it was a knitted fabric and you could just put it in the water and it would absorb the water. It's now becoming a solid felted fabric, which is somewhat water resistant. Wool is naturally water and soil resistant and antimicrobial, germ repellent, so long-lasting, durable. So these bags made like this will last a long time and are easy to maintain and keep clean. Of course, people who are sensitive to wool may not enjoy having such a bag or making these kinds of things, but most people do not have a severe sensitivity to wool. I've never had anyone report an allergic reaction from carrying one of my bags, but I do always let people know they're made from wool, and I have people that mention that they're sensitive and so they prefer not to carry one. That makes sense. Or they prefer not to work with the wool fibers. Of course. Let's take a closer look at this pocket because I think that it's a good solid pocket with good seams, with no holes. Tiny hole right there. As I said, I'm no longer concerned about damaging or over-felting the bag or hurting it because it's so thoroughly felted. It's almost completely felted. It's not going to felt to itself. You shouldn't stretch it or wring it. It's okay to squeeze it. But it's not fragile. It's not delicate. It's heavy and soaked and quite transformed from what it looked like when we began. And so this has spanned about 3 hours. The video, of course, is not that long because I took breaks. And the felting itself, I would say, has taken 40 to 50 minutes. I'll tell you, I'll know when I'm done and I'll be able to tell you. And so just a few minutes ago, I said, and when I had it in the cool water, I said, okay, I can tell it's not finished. I want to felt it some more. And I hope you can see that it is continuing to change and shrink and become a more solid fabric at this time. I'm very pleased with it. I am slopping quite a bit more water than usual out of the pan and onto the floor just because I have it tilted so you can see it. My gloves off. Hold it here where you can see the fabric. It's quite solid. I love it. It's looking fantastic. I'm going to keep working on it for a little bit longer, but I think it is very, very nearly done. Quite pleased with this result. I think I'm very nearly ready to call this finished. It's looking really good. I'm going to agitate just a little bit longer, and then I'm going to rinse it in cool water, put all the soap out, and then I will put it in cool water with a little bit of plain white vinegar. Nothing special, plain white vinegar. Just a splash. Say a tablespoon or 2 at the most, in a cool water. Let it soak. Then I will wrap it in a towel to remove some of the water. Maybe wrap it in a second towel if that first towel gets very wet. And then I will lay it flat to dry. And I will let it lay flat probably overnight, at least until late tonight. And then I might begin shaping it. But it will stay wet or damp for many hours, as much as a couple of days. And again, that won't hurt anything at all. And it gives you an opportunity to do a little bit of shaping if you want to. And we created the bag in a shape. It's going to retain that shape. I think the little bit of shaping I do is to create a little bit of a flat bottom. And I will show you that when I've shaped it. I do think this is about as velvet as it's going to be. I think it's going to shrink or change much more. pocket and the inside of the bag look very nice. Pocket doesn't have any holes in the seams. Turned out very nice. The strap looks good, the flap looks good. Still a buttonhole there. Easier to make the buttonhole bigger at this point than it would be to try to make it smaller if it were too large, but either can be accomplished. Looks quite different than it did just not quite even 4 hours ago. Very happy with these results. And it is quite heavy when it's wet. My arms are tired. But that has been a lot of fun, like magic, right here in my kitchen. Thank you for being here with me. This is the end of this part of this series. I will show the bag as it's drying and as I finish it with some needle embellishment, needle felting embellishment on this side. But for right now, it's been created, it's been felted, it's wet. It will take days for it to dry. And so while it does that, I will move on to other projects. I will take some pictures of it while it's drying, but I will move on to other projects, let it dry, and then in a few days, come back to do the needle felting on it. And I would like to have this bag finished in about a month, so that really does give me time to finish it up, get a button for it, and I'm very pleased with the progress so far. Thank you for being here with me.